What's up guys? In this episode we're going to be building a tray and some tray mounts for my Barra powered 4580. I've actually had this design in CAD for months and I've just been tweaking and adjusting the dimensions to make sure that it is perfect and I don't have to do it again. There's so many things to consider when you're designing tray and tray mounts, and I'm going to go through that later in the episode. For those of you who are new to my channel, this is my first project car and this is the first time I'm designing and building a tray and some tray mounts. So yeah, I've been under the hood for 6 months building some really fiddly bits, but I'm so excited to build my first tray because the car is finally going to start taking some shape. So here's the build montage for the tray. Hope you enjoy it. 4mm laser cut tray mounts. Gonna fold these right here on the workbench, so I've got all my relief cuts here and then I'll buzz it with the MIG. The beauty of these relief cuts on the laser means I can just fold it in the vise, which means I don't need a folder, which is super handy for these smaller parts. So nothing required here, no tools, just super strength. No, I'm joking. It's super easy to fold. Oop. Generated a cut list from CAD and gave it to the steel supplier, and they've just pre-cut all the lengths for me. To do is cut the miters on it. If you design it on CAD, it's always worth spending that extra half an hour and doing all your drawings in your cut list, so I don't have to go check the computer with my greasy hands, and it means I can spend a whole day out in the shed. So I've literally got every single length and all the miters I need to put on them. got Mez out here helping me with some center mounts today, so these are going to go right in here. These are completely unnecessary, but this tray is going to be built to last.
calling to say I
Let me just run you through the design of my tray mounts and tray. So firstly, let me just say that this tray is about 90% finished. So I need to finish off the rear end of the tray, obviously put some lights and a number plate in here. Now I really want an under tray drawer. There's a heap of space in there. I want to package a water tank and batteries under there as well. To get the under tray drawer right is a really challenging design problem. Obviously you want it as deep as possible so you can fit stuff in. You do not want it affecting the departure angle. And then you've got to fit all your number plate and lights on there as well. And I really want round lights to complement the front, but they're harder to package because they're bigger. So there's quite a lot actually in the rear end design. All roads at the moment are pointing towards me making a custom fully submersible drawer, which I've never done before, and I'm really nervous because I've had really minimal experience with sealing drawers. So how hard could it be, right? I say that now, but I know that I'm going to run into strife. So that's where I'm at, and that's why I haven't finished it. Same with these sheets, these checker plate sheets. I haven't welded them on yet because I want access to the back end of the vehicle for as long as possible. It's one of the last things I'll do. I'm still working on the design for the rear end, and it takes time, and I want to get it right because I do not want it affecting performance, but I want it to be practical as well and look good. So those are sort of the trade-offs that I'm dealing with at the moment. All right, let's get into my custom design tray mounts. So some of the features of mine are that it actually sits on top of the chassis and then it has this gusset that runs down the side. All the load from this rail effectively goes straight down here onto the chassis, which is a really good thing. I've seen a lot of cantilevered beam designs and even a single shear, which I wasn't a big fan of. So a lot of mounts that have to get welded onto the side, and I think this is a better design because the load goes on top of the rail. These little wings, I guess you'd call them here, effectively they're going to, when I'm wheeling hard, they're going to provide really good lateral support if the tray's knocked around. And a lot of the mounts don't do that. So these are 4mm steel, and I ran them through FEA with a 2-ton load on the top, and I think they're going to be able to survive jumps like this. Let me just say, I ran this through FEA as more of a sanity check, and for all the engineers out there, I've had to make a heap of assumptions to make this simulation run, and I'm not going to go into the detail because I'd be here all day, and I don't think that many people are actually interested in it. My FEA says my tray mounts have around 70 MPa of stress at the worst case loading scenario, and the yield strength of the steel that I'm using is around the 220 MPa mark, so they're about 3 times stronger than they need to be. The tray literally just sits straight on top of them, and then you just put the M16 through to fasten them. Very easy to bolt on and off. I did think about getting a spanner and a socket in there, and I measured my socket, and I can definitely get it in there. So, I did think about bolt and nut position when I did it. This is my front mount. I've also got this rear one as well. Pretty much the same design, just a little bit shorter due to the nature of the chassis. All right, let's talk about this middle mount really quickly. This is really simple. It's just a 100 by 50 piece of blue bar. I've welded a 4mm plate onto this main rail of the tray, and then I've got a 4mm plate on top of this blue bar as well, and I've tapped an M12 into it, so it's got 7mm of meat to go into, and I've got a spring washer on this side. So, look, I think, is this necessary? From a load perspective, not really. I think you could get away with 4. From a mechanical design perspective, it's far better to have a middle mount in here than not have one at all because it effectively halves the span length here. So the load path is drastically improved because the load can just travel straight down this middle mount, and it's a really low weight penalty to pay for an improved load path. If you look at the chassis, the profile of the rail is significantly shorter at the back than where it is where the suspension loads are taken. If you were to put something heavy in the middle of the tray, most of the load would basically travel down the middle mount to one of the most solid points of the chassis where it's designed to take all the loads from the suspension. In case you're wondering why I didn't go with the same design as the rear or the front, it's because through articulation, this wheel is going to travel up and it's going to get really close to the chassis here. So this is completely flush with the chassis, and so is this rail. So I've seen a heap of trays and they're pretty much all solid mounted. What I plan on doing is probably putting like a 3mm strip of rubber in between my mounts, and that should just take the edge off. So my tray's held on by 4 M16s and then 4 M12s as well. They're all class 8.8, which means they're good for 770,000 newtons of tensile load on them, which is 78 tons, which means, if we're in a tight spot, we actually should be able to recover off this tray. So I have built this as effectively a structural member. I mean, I don't intend to recover off it, but hypothetically, we definitely could use a jack on it if we needed to. I don't really see many scenarios where we will actually need to, but you never know. CAD tells me this tray weighs around the 170 kilo mark. that doesn't account for all the filler that I've had to put into here with MIG. I don't think that'd weigh that much either. So really, I think we're probably around the 175, 180 mark. It may seem heavy, but I guess one of the main reasons why I did steel is because this roll hoop here is effectively a structural member. So if I went an alley tray, and I definitely would go an alley tray if I was just doing touring, then I probably would have had to think about integrating a roll hoop into this cab, because it is literally Coke can thickness. Like, it is just so thin. If you were to do a lid skid in one of these cabs without an internal roll hoop or a structural tray or an exo cage or something like that, then you would not be in for a good time. So that's definitely one of the reasons why I've bulked up the rear of the tray. This is 100 by 50 by 3 mil, and we've got 32 NB bracing it. Now, one of the mistakes that I've made is I ran the long member, which is the uncut member, to the passenger side. So in theory, I mean, the welds are pretty strong, but the passenger would be safer because they've got, you know, the uncut side. So that's good to know. If you're going for a ride with me, I'll try not to roll it, or if I do, I'll roll it onto the passenger side on purpose because I know that's stronger. I've actually run the roll hoop through FEA as well, and it should survive a rollover. Crash loads are really hard to estimate. Just on a slow speed rollover, it should be all right. I purposely went with an angled hoop because I plan on putting at least a half canopy on this thing, and it's way easier to just do angles. I guess there's a lot of personal preference involved with this sort of stuff, and I really do prefer the curves to match the cab. And if I was going to leave it exposed as a tray without a canopy, then I probably would have done a curved hoop. I mean, if you're putting a canopy on the back of these, then it just doesn't make sense to do a curved hoop. I think it's going to be way easier to make a canopy with the angled hoop. So that's why I've gone with that option. I've also used 32 NB to go right across there. So this is also structural, and you know, if I'm tying stuff down to my tray, it means that it won't smash into my cab. So this is 32 NB, and I've got some steel sheet, which is still tacked, and I will weld it when I do all this, and I'll do it all at once. To maximize usable space on my tray, I've sunk all my structural members back as far as possible, which gives me an extra, I think it's almost 60 mil of space. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to use that space for, but even if my canopy finishes here or something like that, then I've got 60 mil behind it. Even if it's just putting wires and packaging thin objects behind it, I'm not quite sure, but I just figure, you know, when you're designing it, you may as well try and make as much space as possible. So I guess just say I managed to save a heap of weight on the rear with an alley tray, and then I had to run an internal cage or an exo cage. Then I guess, you know, what's the actual net saving of doing an alley tray? It'd be way more expensive, way harder to make. Keep it real, keep it steel. This is going to be absolutely fantastic in the bush, especially when I integrate guards in this design, which you will see in the next episode. So it's going to be a really good structural member for me. As I mentioned earlier, I've got some 2 mil checker plate on here. Now, I haven't welded this on yet. I got my steel supplier to cut these sheets to size, so they line up perfectly, and there's a structural member under there, which is going to be nice and solid once it's all welded. I'm thinking about putting some access hatches in here as well. I just don't quite know where yet. That's why I want to do the under tray packaging first. The reason why I didn't go alley is because I couldn't think of a good way to integrate it in without having, you know, rattles and stuff like that. So I guess once this is fully welded in, it really should be, I'll weld it all to the structural members on the underside as well. So, you know, by the time that's all welded in, it really shouldn't rattle around. So that's one of the main motivations for going steel. It is obviously heavier, but again, it's going to make the whole tray more rigid and stronger. So I think keeping it all steel is a pretty good move in the long run. So materials that I've used 3 mil wall thickness on the outside. I've used 2 mil for all the structural members where my checker plate's going to get welded to. And then for the hoop, I've used 3 mil as well. And also for the main rails, I've used 3 mil, same stuff as the hoop. So I guess that's all I really want to say about my tray design. I hope I haven't rabbited on too long. It may look like a really simple tray, but I've put a lot of thought and a lot of design work into getting it right. And I'm really glad, because I don't want to have to do this job twice. It is a lot of work to build a tray. I haven't designed my under tray setup yet for a few reasons, but basically it all boiled down to me not trusting my CAD, and I really wanted the tray on the back so I could get some dimensions off the car and then design my under tray setups. I'd just like to give a huge shout out to my little brother Alex and Mez from barratheworld.com, who both came over and gave me a big chop out to get this thing done. I honestly couldn't have done it without you guys, so really appreciate the time that you've given me. So that's all for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed building that tray way too much. If you like this content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and drop me a comment. I really enjoy responding to them all. Cheers.